On today's show, the Nets come out on top during an epic tank battle with the Pacers. I'll tell you why the loss could prove massive down the line on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm your host, Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. And on today's episode, I'm going to be recapping Brooklyn's 115-110 loss to the Indiana Pacers on Wednesday at Barclays Center. And this was somewhat of an improbable loss, but my takeaway, this is a loss that could benefit the Nets in a huge way down the line, because following this loss against a fellow tanking team, the Nets are one game back of second place in the draft lottery standings, and they have a very difficult schedule coming up post-All-Star break, which I'll get more into later. But the Nets have a very real chance to get up into the top three of the lottery standings over the next few weeks. But more on this game in particular, the Pacers went all out on a tank. They had beaten the New York Knicks on Tuesday in overtime at Madison Square Garden. They went all out in that game. And in this game, they rested nearly their entire rotation. It was similar to what we saw the Washington Wizards do against the Nets on Saturday. Without Tyrese Halliburton, Ivica Zubac, and Obi Toppin were already sidelined, the Pacers rested Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, and TJ McConnell in this one. Their starting lineup was Cam Jones, Kobe Brown, Ben Shepherd, Jarris Walker, and Jay Huff. Their bench was Micah Potter, Quentin Jackson, Ethan Thompson, and Talon Peter. And you guys probably don't even know several of the players that I just named in that rotation. And to their credit, the Nets' credit, they countered by not playing Michael Porter Jr. and Nick Claxton. Noah Clowney was actually available for this game, but then ruled out right before tip-off. I was told that he was on the status report with an ankle sprain, and I was told that he tried to warm up before the game. It was bothering him, and the Nets ruled him out. So how much do you believe that? How much do you read into that? That is up to your discretion. But even with those three guys out, three Nets starters, arguably their three top players, it didn't look like the Nets were going to be able to lose this one. They were up by 18 points. Nolan Troy was hooping again. Yegor Djoman had some nice moments. Day'Ron Sharpe was dominating as usual. But their second unit came in and gave the game back. And that second unit was Ben Surratt, Drake Powell, Ochai Agbaji, who made his Nets debut, Jalen Wilson, and Danny Wolf. And look, when you hold out guys like that, like Michael Porter Jr., Nick Claxton, Noah Clowney, the Nets do still have some talent in their starting lineup because they have Troy, Dioman, they have some of these other guys who have been playing well. But this second unit looked really rough in this game, and it honestly was the difference in why the Nets were able to come away with a loss, because that was a group that has not yet played together this season. I said Surratt, Powell, Agbaji, Wilson, Wolf. They haven't played together yet this season, and they looked pretty rough, especially in the second half. The Nets were leading the Pacers 86-73 when the starters checked out late in the third quarter, and it looked like they were in control of the game. It looked like, there really wasn't, it didn't seem like there was a chance that they were going to lose. But then that second unit comes in. I said they check in 86-73 when the second unit checks in late in the third quarter. And when they check out midway through the fourth, it's 98-87. So they let up a 25-11 run. They shot 2 of 10 during that span with several turnovers. And then it's basically, the Nets are down 1 when their starters come back in midway through the fourth quarter. And they play the Pacers pretty evenly in the final minutes. But then Cam Jones gets the ball. The Pacers are tied with about 20 seconds remaining. Cam Jones takes a sidestep three late in the shot clock with 15 seconds remaining. He drills it. That puts the Pacers up 3. And then Yegor Dioman gets a game-tying look-off from 3 in the final seconds, but he can't hit. And that's the difference. And that's the loss for the Nets. And this is ultimately, while losing to a Pacers team that is resting this many guys, it's not great optically, it's tough. But the Nets also had guys out. They have a lot of rookies playing, 5 rookie first-round picks playing in this game. And this is ultimately a good outcome for the Nets. You had some rookies play well. Day'Ron Sharpe had another very good game. I'll get more into him later, but you still come away with a loss against a fellow tanking team. And if you look at the Nets' upcoming schedule, this team has a real chance to move up even higher in the lottery standings. Right now they're in 5th, but they are one game back of the teams who are in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and that is the Pacers, the Wizards, and the New Orleans Pelicans. Because you look at the Nets' upcoming schedule post-All-Star break, 12 of their next 17 games are against winning teams. They have a gauntlet of a schedule coming up. They don't play another team in the bottom 6 of the lottery standings during that span. That's the Kings, Pacers, Wizards, Pelicans, Jazz. They don't play any of those teams, and those teams, those other tanking teams, do face each other in several games. So the Nets are going to have a real chance to make up some serious ground in the draft lottery standings. They had, the win over the Jazz, and then they had the back-to-back win over the Wizards and the Bulls, and it looked like it was pretty likely that they were going to win this game. And, the second unit doesn't play well. A few bounces go the Pacers' way, and then they are ultimately able to come away with a loss, which is a huge outcome because if they win this game, that's a huge swing. Like, you might not be able to recover from that during the rest of the season, given how hard some of these teams are tanking, like the Wizards, like the Pacers, like the Jazz, all those teams that owe those mid-pick protections, on their traded picks. Those teams are going to be taking really hard. So getting an outcome like this is really big. And if you talk about, I said Cam Jones drains that 3 with 15 seconds remaining, a go-ahead 3 late in the shot clock, sidestep 3. He had turned the ball over on like 2 of their previous 3 possessions. He hadn't had a great game overall. Cam Jones was 5 of 12 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. He was 0 of 5 before he took that shot, and he hits that. So you can say somewhat of an improbable shot. And you look at it, there are several shots this season by opponents that Nets fans are going to look back on if the team gets a top draft pick come June. Or come May in the draft lottery standings. You have, obviously, the Paolo Banchero game winner. He banks that in overtime here at Barclays Center in that Magic win. That gives the Nets 1 loss. That's pretty improbable shot. You have the Sadiq Bey game-tying 3 that he hit in the final minute of the Nets' loss in New Orleans, which was like late in the shot clock. It was a prayer 3 after a broken possession. He throws it up. He hits it. The Nets end up losing that game. You have the Hugo Gonzalez corner 3 in the final seconds of overtime, and that loss to the Celtics here at Barclays Center. Miscommunication by the Nets. Hugo hits the 3. Celtics end up pulling off an improbable win. And then you have this Cam Jones 3 to give the Pacers the lead in this one. Another shot that I would say, he's an NBA player. He can hit it, but not a high percentage shot of going in. And that's 4 losses that the Nets have picked up. And if there's anything that was proven last season, we know one game can be the difference. Like Nick Claxton threw in a buzzer beater against the 76ers, and that wound up giving the 76ers the 5th spot in the lottery standings and end up giving them BJ Edgecombe. So one game can be the difference. And this is now 4 games the Nets came out with losses, somewhat improbable losses, with the other teams hitting huge threes in the final seconds or minutes of the game. But you have to give the Nets credit in this one because there had been some complaints from some fans about them not tanking hard enough in these recent games. They had beat the Jazz, they beat the Wizards, they beat the Bulls. They didn't sit out some guys that maybe they could have during those games. But as I said, they rest MPJ and they rest Claxton. Claxton was not on the injury report. Then they downgraded him to questionable, and then they ruled him out. So it seems like they saw who the Pacers might be holding out, and they said, we're going to have to rest Claxton in this game. And then they, hold out Noah Clowney. You can read into that, whether that was a tanking move, whether he actually had ankle soreness, up to your discretion. But we did see something else about the Nets tanking strategy during this game, and that is that the Nets are not going to throw away games during games. They're not going to manipulate games to lose the way that some of these other teams are doing, the way that the Jazz are doing, holding out Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. for entire 4th quarters. The Pacers today, Jarris Walker was the Pacers' top player. He had 23 points on 9 of 18 shooting. He did not play in the final 5 minutes of this game. I will say that he did play 32 minutes before that, but still, he was their top player, their go-to offensive guy the whole game. They hold him out for the final 5 minutes. Jordi Fernandez is not going to do that. He is not going to try to lose games during the flow of a game. He has clearly not received that directive from Sean Marks, from Joe Tsai during games. Like, if you're winning and we're trying to lose this game, the Nets are perceivably, like, from a management standpoint, trying to lose every game. But Jordi Fernandez isn't going to do that during games. He isn't going to, when that Nets second unit is really struggling and they, the Pacers go up 1 midway through the 4th quarter, he's not going to roll with that second unit. He's going to put in Nolan Troy, Yegor Dioman, Ben Saraf like he did. He's going to go to the unit that has been having success, and that is obviously a signal that he's coaching to win. And look, some fans might not agree with that, but me personally, I think that's how it should be. Management, in my opinion, the way that it should go is management tanks, organizations tank, players and coaches shouldn't, at least during a game. Management should decide who is available on a nightly basis, which players are going to be held out, which players are going to play, and then the coach should coach to win with whatever players he is given. That's just my opinion. Some people might disagree with it, but I think that you're already signaling, that this is a tanking season with some of the guys that you're holding out in some of these games. When you get into manipulating games and literally throwing games during them, as the Jazz and some teams are doing, that's, I think, a slippery slope. And I think that that might be a bridge too far, in my opinion, in terms of the negative message that you're sending to the locker room. So I don't have a problem with how the Nets, are going about this in terms of their in-game adjustments, but I do think that they should continue to be aggressive about holding guys out, especially against other tanking teams or other bad teams during the second half of the season. But despite the Nets coming away with a loss, obviously good for the draft lottery standings in the tank race. But another good aspect of this is that the Nets did get some high-level performances from their rookies, notably Nolan Troy, who continued to ball out in this game. Yegor Dioman also had some good moments. So what did we see from those guys? What should Nets fans be looking for from them moving forward? I'll get into all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and locations. Guys, if I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who can help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Guys, there's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Guys, you'll pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and you'll have the tickets locked in within minutes. You'll love seeing the all-in price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Being able to see the view from the seat before buying makes decisions easy, and zone deals will stand out. Choose the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. Coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Brooklyn's 115-110 loss to the Indiana Pacers. And I outlined why this loss is very good for the Nets in terms of the tank race. But another reason I think that you can have some positive takeaways from this game was the performance of Nolan Troy and Yegor Dioman, particularly Nolan Troy. And I'll say, I think that it speaks volumes when the Nets are, if you're a Nets fan who's rooting against them and you think that you want them to lose these games, these last few games when you're watching it, if Nolan Troy and Yegor Dioman are on the court, that's a bad sign for the Nets' ability to lose a game. And I think that that is a good sign, obviously, for how you're going to feel about those guys long term. And we all know that Nolan has been hooping as of late. These last 11 games prior to tonight, these last 6 that he had started, he's been playing really well. He was coming off a 13-point, 13-assist performance during that win over the Bulls. Those 13 assists were tied for the most by any rookie in the NBA this season. And he comes out and he puts together another pretty high-level performance in this one. 20 points, 8 assists, 5 turnovers. You want to clean up the turnovers, but 8 of 14 from the field, 2 of 14 from 3, and he was a plus 12 in 31 minutes he played in this one. So another high-level performance, in my opinion, from Nolan. Just starting off with what he did, early in this game and right off the bat. He's just continuing to play with a lot of decisiveness, a lot of, kind of spring in his step. He's able to get downhill at will, and we're seeing him. The passing vision is continuing to look like a major positive. I'd say I counted in the last 2 games between the Bulls game and this game, maybe like 7, 8, 9, 10 plays where Nolan is getting a blow by, getting into the paint. He's seeing the low man rotate over, and he's firing these bullet cross-court skip passes to shooters in the corner or on the wing. And we're seeing that, fairly often at this point. So his ability to create advantages, his ability to kind of map the court out once he gets that downhill advantage is really positive. Then you're getting some other plays where he's getting downhill, he's scoring at the rim, he's probing in the mid-range, he's hitting his floater. We even had a play at the end of the first half in this one where Nolan got a switch onto Jay Huff. He hit him with a crossover, saw Jay Huff kind of retreating, pulled up from 3 and drained a pull-up 3 off a crossover with like 2 seconds left in the first half. And that was a play where I said, Nolan's obviously not known for his jump shot. That looked very smooth. So overall, I think that all of that is positive. And then you look at the end of the game, I said the Nets were down by 1 point when the starters checked back in midway through the fourth quarter. And it wasn't a very high-level close. As well as Nolan played in the beginning of the game, he had some turnovers down the stretch of this game. He had a shot where he went up, tried to challenge Jay Huff at the rim. He got blocked. So the Nets didn't really play well down the stretch. He did have some assists and decent plays down the stretch. But overall, they didn't play that well down the stretch. Nolan struggled. Yegor struggled somewhat in the final minutes. And they weren't able to get over the hump because of that. But I'd say that's Nolan gaining, experience in closing situations and high leverage moments and clutch moments. That's something that he hasn't gotten a ton of because Nolan was out of the rotation for the most part early in the season. He's come back over these last, 15 games or so. He's been a full-time member of the rotation, but the Nets haven't had a ton of clutch games during that span where Nolan was in because he wasn't starting during a lot of those clutch games. So overall, even though he wasn't able to, make some of the plays down the stretch, gaining that experience, I think, is a positive. And then you talk about Yegor Dioman, who I also think overall had a positive game in this one. 13 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 turnover, 3 of 8 from the field, 3 of 7 from 3, 4 of 4 from the free throw line. It wasn't a flashy game from Yegor. I think that there were moments where it looked like he could have asserted himself a little bit more on the ball, but he did have Nolan Shore, who was having a big game alongside him in that lead ball handler point guard role. But overall, if you look at from Yegor, 13 points on 8 shots, that's efficient. 5 assists, 1 turnover, that's efficient. Coming in with 5 rebounds, that's pretty efficient. And then you look at in the final few minutes of this game, he wasn't able to hit the go-ahead 3 in the final seconds, but he did hit another clutch time 3, I think to give the Nets either to tie the game or give the Nets a 1-point lead with 2 or 3 minutes left. He got a Nolan Shore pass on a relocation to the corner, and he drained a corner 3, another big shot. Yegor, his clutch shooting has just been off the charts for a rookie during this season. So overall, nothing flashy from Yegor. You see, 7 3-point attempts, only 1 2-point attempt. He got to the free throw line, was 4 of 4 from there. But I do think you'd like to see him assert himself a little bit more downhill on the ball. But I can't fault him too much when Nolan had the ball the majority of the game and was playing well for the majority of the game. So I think overall positive performance from those 2 games. And, in a game where the Nets come away with a big tank loss, I don't think you're going to look for too much more from those 2 guys in terms of positive takeaways. So that was good to see. I want to get some more into some of the other Nets rookies. Also, Day'Ron Sharpe, who I thought had a really positive game in this one. And then overall, some thoughts about this Nets team as we head into the All-Star break. So we'll get into all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. The winter games are officially here, and if you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. Guys, you'll be fully locked into the drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, speed skating matches decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right through the opening face-off. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode following Brooklyn's 115-110 loss to the Indiana Pacers. And I just talked about the reasons that Nets fans can have some positive takeaways from this game. And I said Nolan Shore and Yegor Dioman, pretty high-level performances. And that last guy I want to close it out on talking about who played well in that starting lineup. 2 guys, actually. Day'Ron Sharpe had another big-time game. Day'Ron Sharpe, it seems like when he gets opportunities to play big minutes, to be a starter, he just produces. It's what he does. So you look at him in this game, he had 19 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 turnover, 2 blocks, 2 steals, 8 of 11 from the field. He was a plus 13. It's what Day'Ron does. Like, Day'Ron is just, he's like one of the better kept secrets in the NBA, in my opinion. You look at him, he's been stuck behind Nick Claxton. I said the Nets might be put at a point in the near future where they're deciding on these two guys, but ultimately the Nets have a $6 million team option on Day'Ron next season. I think that this summer they should try to lock him in on an extension, because once he starts getting big minutes consistently, I think it's going to become pretty apparent that he is a high-level player in the NBA. And if you can lock him down this summer on a contract that's like, 4 years, somewhere in the 10 to 15 million annually range, I would do that. And I think that contract will age really well. So another positive performance from Day'Ron. It's just what he does. Other guy is Zaire Williams, who had it go in this game. He had 19 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist. He was 7 of 13 from the field and 5 of 7 from 3. Also a plus 13. That whole starting lineup was either a plus 12 or plus 13. Positive performance from Zaire Williams. It was nice to see him get it going from 3. The Nets were they were really hot from 3. I think they were 13 of 26 at one point, and they finished the game 14 of 34. And them going cold in the fourth quarter is one of the main reasons why they, came away with a loss in this one. But good game from Zaire Williams. Last couple of guys I want to close it out on talking about are the other Nets rookies, though, who struggled in the second unit, and that is Danny Wolf, Ben Suraf, and Jalen Wilson. The second unit struggled overall. I'll start off with Ben Suraf, who, I feel like to some people has been somewhat of a tank commander, and I do think that he had some, tough moments in this game. But overall, it was one of the better games that we've seen Ben Suraf play this season, at least statistically. He had 12 points that matched the season high. He was 4 of 6 from the field and 4 of 6 from the free throw line. He had 2 assists, 1 turnover. So I think that Ben had some struggles on defense in this game. I think there were some moments where he wasn't commanding the offense maybe as well as you would want, but he had some good moments in this game, especially in the first half. He had a couple of really nice takes to the rim, one of which he threw down a dunk, actually going really aggressive at one of the Pacers centers. It was either Jay Huff or Micah Potter. I can't remember, but I don't think Ben is having a massive impact or anything along those lines, but he had been struggling in a huge way in recent games. So to see him have a game where he's 4 or 6 from the field, he was finding his touch a little bit, had some nice drives and finishes, some nice decels where he was able to convert around the rim. I think that overall, despite him not having like the on-off impact, I think that overall was positive. Then you look at the other Nets rookies in this one. Danny Wolf, he started off pretty well. He hit a couple of threes. He had a couple of nice takes, but overall he finishes with 14 points, 8 rebounds, 0 assists, 3 turnovers. He was 4 of 13 from the field and 2 of 7 from 3. He finishes a minus 18. Whole second unit was minus 18 or minus 17. But I think you saw some decent things from Danny Wolf. Like, he looked like the three-point shot was starting to get into rhythm early on. He had some good performances in the last 2 games. But then overall, 2 of 7 from 3. He was 2 of 6 on 2s. Like, that has kind of been the story with Danny Wolf during the recent stretch where he's been struggling for the most part. My questions has been, with his grounded athleticism, with his lack of, quickness or some burst or, explosive pop, vertical pop near the rim, is he going to be able to be an efficient 2-point scorer, an efficient scorer inside the restricted area? That is very much still up in the air. And then you look at the 3-point shot, also very much still up in the air. And I think you saw him have some struggles from 2 and from 3 as the game progressed. So, how is that going to, bear out as we move forward with Danny Wolf? I have some questions about whether he's going to be able to be an efficient 2-point shooter just because he's largely a below-the-rim player. But the areas that I would really look for as the kind of swing areas for Danny are going to be the 3-point shooting, obviously, and then the decision-making. Today, 0 assists, 3 turnovers. You're going to really need to see Danny be able to leverage his advantage creation, this kind of herky-jerky style that he can play. You're going to need to see him try to leverage that into playmaking and being efficient. So that, the 3-point shooting, the main things that I would look for from Danny Wolf. And then Drake Powell, he had 6 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 of 4 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, 3 of 4 from the free throw line. We just didn't see Drake do that much. And this is the thing with Drake. Last game, we saw him have some really good moments, but then there's a lot of games where you just don't really notice him out there. And I think that he needs to kind of find a better way to get involved within the flow of the offense, even when you have guys like Ben Suraf, like Danny Wolf, handling the lion's share of the opportunities, with that second unit. You'd like to see Drake assert himself more and do some things, because we have seen that Drake can do some nice things when he gets the ball. He has, obviously, a very quick first step. He's an explosive finisher around the rim. He's shown some mid-range chops, but you just see it far too often where it looks like he's kind of floating through a game offensively, not asserting himself. And look, he is a player who, posted the lowest usage rate in NBA history among a wing to be drafted, last season at North Carolina. So this isn't obviously, it's obviously like asserting himself, being a guy who demands a lot of on-ball touches, somewhat of a foreign concept to him, but you would still like to see him get a little bit more involved as games progress. But we're getting into the All-Star break. The Nets now, I've said, are in a pretty good position in regard to the draft lottery standings, especially with their upcoming schedule. I said 12 of the Nets' next 17 games are coming against winning opponents, and you look at the next slate of upcoming games, just the next 10 games, let's say. They have Cleveland, OKC, Atlanta, Dallas, San Antonio, Boston, Cleveland, Miami, Detroit. So the Nets might not win a game during that stretch. The game I would point to is the Dallas game. Maybe they can get a win against the Hawks or the Heat. But overall, I think there's going to be a lot of losses that are being stacked, and that might be frustrating for some people. But with the Nets coming away with this loss and being only one game out of second place in the draft lottery standings, we'll see how that progresses. But I think that they are in a pretty good position overall. The rookies are getting minutes, and they're in, a decent spot in regard to the draft lottery standings. But that's all I got for you guys on today's episode of Locked On Nets. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy my content, take a second, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. We're to the All-Star break, but I'm going to still be back here with episodes every weekday here on Locked On Nets. I got a Fan Take Friday episode I'm going to be recording tomorrow. I posted on Twitter. If you want to submit a question, reply to that post on Twitter, DM me on Twitter, or email my address, erikslater44@gmail.com. But I'll be getting into that on my next episode. Then I'll have coverage of a wide range of other subjects, draft stuff, some of the things that we've seen, kind of a mid-season check-in from the Nets as we move forward in the next week over this All-Star break. But I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.